welcome to Chapter 2 of Probability and Statistics. We are on day 1. If we look at Chapter 2, our topic for Chapter 2 is describing distributions of data. And so on this slide right here, I have a bunch of different graphs. And so I have I have a histogram right here. I have a stem and leaf plot over here. I have a bar graph over here, a box and whisker plot down here, a pie graph or circle graph, we call it both, and then just a frequency graph right here. And so as we go through Chapter 2, we're going to learn how to make all of these. Today our focus, though, are on bar graphs and pie graphs. Today we're going to focus on how to make a bar graph and how to make a pie chart or a circle graph. And so our topic today, like I said, bar graphs and pie charts. Our essential outcome is that you will be able to make and describe bar graphs and pie charts. And so before we make any of those, we need to look at some data. So here we have a question. It says, what do we mean by distribution? And so if you think about Chapter 2, our topic is describing distributions of data. And so the distribution of data, what it really tells us is the distribution of a variable tells us the different values or answers that variable takes and how often it takes these values. And so if we look at this table, we can talk about, high school and level of education of people. So talks about people that have less than a high school education, people that are high school graduates, that have some college, that have a bachelor's degree, and have advanced degrees. And so over here we have the number of people in thousands, and so what we really have is there's 5,126. That's really 5,126,000 people have less than a high school degree. And that's 12.9% of the total of people in ages 25 to 34 in the U.S. in 2007. And so if we look at that and we look at the percentages, and that tells us a little bit of information about this data, just having a table. And then as we think about this, does the sum of the number of persons add to 39,868? Do these numbers actually add up to 39,000? I'd like you to pause the video right now and now when I added this all up, I actually got 39,870. And even if you look at what they got 39,868. And so what we call that is we actually call that the round off error. If you notice, so ours are different by about by 2, which is really different by 2,000. And that's because when they are writing down these numbers, they're actually, remember this is really 5,126,000, 11,408,000, 10,961,000, etc. And what they did is they rounded those numbers in here. So rather than, it's not exactly 5,126,000, it's probably 5,125,721 people or something like that. And so we call that round off error. It occurs, we try to keep it to a minimum, but it does occur as we're collecting data and doing stuff with it. And so if we look at this next picture, this is dealing with the exact same data that we looked at in that table, but here it is in a bar graph. And what a bar graph is a graphical display of data using bars of different heights to represent the value of each variable. And so rather than just looking at a bunch of numbers, now we can look at bars that kind of show us, not a high school graduate, this bar right here, and advanced degree, those are the smallest categories we're dealing with. And high school graduate, some college, bachelor degrees, these three, they have a lot more people with those level of degrees. And so these are some observations that we can make from this data. We can say, the smallest category is advanced degrees, and that makes sense. It takes the longest amount of time, amount of work, and the highest category is high school graduate, and that would make sense in our culture. We really value high school diplomas, and so that would make sense that that's the highest. But if you look at some college, that's pretty close in comparison. Those bars are similar heights They're just a little bit different. And that would make sense too. Whether or not people finish college, but doesn't, you know that some things occur that makes you can't finish college, but we do value in our society and in our culture attending college, even if it is for a short period of time. And so that's one way we can organize this data. And so what I'd like to do next is we're actually going to make a bar graph. And so I filled in some information. What we're talking about is their favorite food of students. We have 7 students say their favorite's pizza, 3 say burgers, 2 say chicken, and 5 say other. And so we're going to use this information to fill in our graph below. And so what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm going to divide the bottom into different categories. And so I need to divide it into 4 different categories. So I'm going to put a line here, use black, put a line here, 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 and here. And so now I'm going to label each one of these. We're going to have pizza, we're going to have burgers, we're going to have chicken, and we're going to have other. I know my handwriting's not the best when I'm writing on this board. I apologize for that. And so we know that our biggest category, pizza, it goes up to 7. And so we know our graph needs to go up by 7. If I think about that, I can probably go up by 1s and be fine. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so as I make these graphs, we're going to do some fun different colors. Pizza went up to 7, so we're going to make that go right up to 7. Here is my pizza bar graph. I could even shade that. There we go. And now I've got burgers. Burgers needs to go up to 3. Alright, 3 is right here. Here's my burgers. Chicken is 2, so we need to be able to go up to 2. And other is 5, so it needs to be able to go up to 5. There we go, now it's letting me color. And so if we look at our bar graph, there's a few things that are still missing. And it kind of tells you at the top of the page, it said label. And so what we need to do with our bar graph is we actually need to label some different things. And so we need to label this left side, this vertical side. And so what we're really measuring is if you look at our table, the number of students. And so we can actually write that in there, that is the number of students. So I'm going to use what you guys call a hashtag. It's also known as pound symbol, number of students. Okay, and so that's labeled, and the bottom's labeled with each category, but we don't really know what this is representing. And so what we really need is we need a title. Every graph needs a title, so we need to put a title at the top. We're going to call this students' favorite foods. So now we have our graph. It's labeled, the bottom's labeled, the side's labeled, and we have a title on our graph. So that's just a simple bar graph. Next, we're going to talk about pie charts. Alright, and so if we look at a pie chart, here's what that exact same data about graduation and diplomas and stuff like that. And so a pie chart, what it uses is it uses pie slices to show the relative size of categories. And so we have a whole pie and it's divided into the different parts. And what's really key is we need to make sure that all the pieces of the pie add up to 100%. And so if we look in our pie chart, it's the exact same data we saw on that table, the exact same data we saw on that bar graph. And we can tell that high school graduation and some college, those are once again our largest categories. Advanced degree and not a high school graduate, those are once again our smallest categories. And those are the exact same observations we made from the bar graph. We can also notice that high school graduate and some college, those are really close in size. If they didn't have the percentages listed, I might even think that they're the same size. And so in order to make a pie chart, we actually need to start with a table. And so in your notes, you're going to do this along with me. What we're doing is we're going to find favorite ice cream flavor of different students. So I already pre-filled in some of this. We've got vanilla, chocolate, mint, strawberry, and other. And so the number of students, well, 5 students like vanilla, 7 like chocolate, 3 like mint, 2 like strawberry, and 8 like other. And so what we need to know as we're making a pie chart is we need to know the whole. How many students did we ask in total? And so if we add those all up, we asked 25 students. You may ask why that's important. Well, because it's going to help us find the decimal. And so if we start with vanilla, to find that decimal, we need to take the number of students who like vanilla, and divide it by the whole, that 25. So we take 5 divided by 25, and we get 0.2, so that is our decimal for that one. The next step of what we do is we take our decimal and we multiply it by 360. And so the reason why we do that is because 360 degrees in a circle. So you go 0.2 times 360. Well, that's going to be 72 degrees in our circle. And so there we have our first one filled out. What I'd like to do now is pause the video and fill out those next 4. So as you're doing that, you might actually get some decimal numbers for your degrees. Like for chocolate, I got 0.28 as my decimal, and I got 100.8 as my degrees. We're going to round that to the nearest whole number, so we're going to round that to 101 degrees. And if that happens throughout the rest of the table, make sure you're round it to your nearest whole number for these degrees. What I always do before I move on to graphing or doing anything with percentages, I always double check that my degrees add up to 360. So I add them all up: 72 plus 101 plus 43 plus 29 plus 115. And I do get 360 in this graph. Sometimes when you have to round, which we did round three of these, sometimes when you have to round, you might end up with 361 degrees or 358 degrees. As long as it's like 2 or 3 away from 360, you're good. But if it's more than that, then you need to go back and you need to double check that your decimals are correct and that your rounding for your degrees were correct for them.